Vasudevaya. So, continuing with the fireside stories. So I thought I would speak a little about a very ancient and a wonderful Puranic story about a boy who would be king. So there was a very famous king that had a huge empire. And as was the custom, they would often have more than one wife. These states were frequently, not often, but somewhat frequently, there were wars. And sons, it was expected in these ancient times that if you are the leader, you have to be at the head of the army. You don't get to stay back and hide behind everybody else. You have to be the first one into battle. And because of this, there was an atrocious attrition amongst princes being killed. And so a way to try and manage that situation, the kings would, sometimes for political reasons, but the idea of having more than one wife and producing potential heirs to the throne to prevent instability when the king dies. So this king had two wives, a somewhat older woman who had a son. His name was Dhruva. And he also had a second wife who was a bit younger. And she had a son, Uttama. And Uttama was younger than Dhruva. The king became very infatuated with his second wife, and she was somewhat manipulative. Not somewhat, she was very manipulative. And so the older wife was sort of like pushed into the shadows along with her son, Dhruva, even though he was the eldest boy. So at this age, they're 5 years old, and Uttama is about 4 years old. They're still very, very young. Into the throne room and climbed up on the lap of his dad. And his dad was very affectionately coddling him and, kissing him, and a very affectionate situation. And the younger wife was there quite nearby observing and, of course, very pleased. And Dhruva saw this from some distance, and as a young child wanting the affection of his father, he ran over to his dad and attempted to climb up on his knee also. And the king was, because of the influence of this second wife, he was not nice in how he dealt with him. He sort of ignored him. And then, speaking in a manner that was quite harsh, and so she could be heard by the king, the second wife told Dhruva that you have no place sitting on your father's lap nor on the throne, because you had the misfortune of not being born from my womb. You will never occupy this throne. And Dhruva looked at his dad, and he didn't say anything or do anything. And then he was just he was a really passionate little guy, as we'll hear. He became overwhelmed with anger. And the fact that his dad wouldn't correct her or show him affection, and he got so intensely hurt that his lips were trembling and shedding hot tears. And they call these hot tears when they're shed in great anger or passion. He stormed out of the throne room absolutely sobbing, but he wasn't wimpy. He was a tough little guy, and he went to his mother, and she saw him in this. He was trembling and shaking and sobbing, And she went over and picked him up and held him and asked what's wrong. And he could barely speak. He was in such a state. And one of these servants who had observed what happened told the queen what had transpired. And the mother was overwhelmed with a broken heart to hear this, and she also cried. But she began speaking to her son in a quite unexpected way. She told him that, you know, Dhruva, because Dhruva was beginning to express his anger, she said, you should never speak ill of anyone. People will suffer or be rewarded according to their own actions. There is no need for us to take a position of wishing ill for someone. That's not good to do that. It will happen anyway, but you should not be involved like this. And then he asks her, so what should I do? And the mother said something extraordinary. Although it was painful for her, she accepted that this was the reality of the situation. And she said, unfortunately, what Suniti has spoken is actually true. Because of your misfortune of being born of my womb, so you are being neglected. And if you had have been born from her womb, you would surely become the next king. And Dhruva he just didn't know what to do, and he wanted to find recourse. And he said, he was fundamentally asking, is there any place that I can go to appeal what has happened? And the mother told him that since ancient times, the great sages would go to the forest in order to come to intimately connect with the highest truth, the Supreme Lord. And without batting an eyelid, 5 years old, he jumped off his mother's lap and crying, he stormed off and left the palace grounds. And of course everybody was sort of like a little taken aback. They thought he was just going somewhere to hide out and, and sob and be by himself. But he left the palace and actually entered deep within a forest and tried to meditate. He didn't know what he was doing, and he wanted to find some recourse for what had happened, and he was so utterly determined. Nothing was going to deter him, even sleeping out there alone in the middle of the dark night. So after some time passed, a great rishi, a saintly person, heard about what was going on and came to see him. And seeing him, the young boy noticed him and offered his respects, being well-mannered. And then looking at him, the sage asked, what are you doing? And he began to say, well, I'm trying to engage in this mystic yoga process of Ashtanga, and in order to try and resolve my problem. And this sage shook his head and actually laughed. And he said, just see the great pride of the Kshatriyas. Kshatriya means this was the administrative and the ruling class, warriors and administrators of government. And they are known for their very high pride and not being able to take any insult. And he was saying, like, just look at this example. You ever got a little kid, and his pride is so hurt that he's gone off to the forest living alone in order to try and address the situation. And this boy said, I want to attain a kingdom greater than even my father's or my grandfather's. It's kind of like, I'm going to show these guys, and I'm going to do it no matter what. And so he was Narada Muni told him, look, just go home and wait a few years, and when you are more mature and grown up, I will give you instruction on what to do and how to perform this type of mystic meditation. And he just wasn't having it. No, he's staying there no matter what. So feeling tremendously compassionate towards him, Narada Muni began to instruct him about what he should do, the nature of the pranayama that he should use, the nature of the meditation that he should use. This meditation, this Paramatma meditation, the meditation upon the Supreme Soul who resides within the heart of all living beings. And he described the appearance of this transcendental personality that the yogis would catch a vision of in the maturity of their meditation. And he gave him a mantra to use, which was this mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So he bade him farewell and left. So then Dhruva began this 6 months of amazing austerity. He was like only eating every 3rd day. He was spending all his time, hardly sleeping, spending all his time in this really profound meditation. The pranayama was used to quieten the mind and bring it into focus. And it got to the point where some days, he would only be drinking water. And sometimes a day or more would pass without even doing that. And he was completely absorbed. And after a little over 6 months had passed, he one day attained this transcendental experience of being able to see the manifestation of this divine form sitting within the region of his heart with a countenance that is so unimaginably beautiful, with a smile that is likened to the rising sun, a face that is more beautiful than 10,000 full moons rising at once, it's described. So it was just he had this amazing transcendental experience. And he was overwhelmed in this condition of this samadhi, and completely fixed and experiencing tremendous, an ecstatic response was what arose. And being lost in this meditation, suddenly this vision that he had disappeared, and he became very disturbed, and he tried to regain it, but then opened his eyes and he saw that same transcendental form manifest before him. And he was overwhelmed with this tremendous spiritual emotion. In the English language, there's nothing that really captures how it's described in Sanskrit. They sometimes refer in Old English to what were known as beatitudes. They're kind of like spiritual gifts, these wonderful experiences. He instantly became overwhelmed by what he was now seeing, and falling to the ground, he offered himself, he offered his breath, his life, his mind, everything. And in this great state of humility, he felt overwhelmed, and he said, I do not know, because of my immaturity, how I should address this wonderful presence. So he was, it describes, he was like touched on the head, and he suddenly had this complete awakening and was able to speak and pray even as a 5-year-old child in the most profound and amazing way. And he was asked, What is it that you want? And he said, I am now utterly ashamed. Having this experience, there is nothing greater than this, and there is nothing more that I want other than to be eternally situated in this state. So he received a spiritual instruction that he should return to the palace and live out his life there. So he took leave and went back to the palace, and the king was overwhelmed to see him. He had become filled with remorse at his harshness, and even his stepmother was now, her heart had become softened. The fact that he had run off and been missing for so long, and they were speculating that wolves or wild animals had killed and eaten his body and they would never find it. And he was asked about what happened. And when he spoke about it, he said that due to the influence of this illusion about myself as being this body, that this world is my home, because of these illusory ideas, I became overwhelmed by my own pride and desire for greatness, that I became utterly blinded, and I looked upon my own brother and his mother as my enemies. And for this, I am so ashamed. He spoke in a really profound way. So that's kind of like a little part of the story. It goes on for quite a while, but that was the part I was going to relate to tonight. And of course, this ancient Puranic story is meditated upon by people that aspire for a transcendental experience and realization. And what is particularly meditated upon or focused upon is the temporary and actually almost worthless reality of material existence. It's so fleeting. It has a beginning and it comes to an end. And yet we spend all of our time totally focused and fixated with something that cannot last. It will surely come to an end. Nor can this experience give me what I actually seek. He was thinking, if I could become incredibly powerful, like unbelievably powerful, that I would have everything that I want. But after this vision that he had, this transcendental vision, he said that it was as if what I was thinking as valuable gems now appear like broken glass. I mean, that's a huge shift in how you see things. And that idea, that principle, is very much applied by us to this world and things of this world. Not really taking the time to, at least to some degree, find balance in my life by adopting a higher purpose for my existence, and to seek that which is eternal, not to become obsessed with that which is temporary. One can never find perfect happiness in that which is temporary. That will be experienced in that which is eternal. And the other thing that is very much meditated upon was when he spoke about how, under the influence of this illusion about, a complete non-acceptance of my spiritual being, just totally absorbed in everything that is external. And because of that, he said we can see some as friends and some as enemies. And because of that, the way in which we interact with others and the way in which we experience life will be filled with unhappiness and pain. Yeah, there'll be some good times, but it doesn't last. And to have and to cultivate an acceptance of the spiritual nature of every person, that we are all intimately connected and related, that we should not treat some with harshness and others with affection based on simply material consideration. We should strive for this vision of our own spiritual nature and the spiritual nature of all living beings. If we learn to live this type of life, then we can come to experience not just happiness, but complete transcendental and spiritual bliss. The awakening of our natural love, spiritual love, will also begin to manifest. Okay? Any question? I mean, sometimes people go like, wow, this is kind of a bit on the cosmic side. But, we think we've got it so together. But you cannot even begin to comprehend the condition of the great sages and spiritual personalities of the past, and how they cultivated all amazing abilities. But that's another story, another time. So of course the way for this transformation to take place is in this age. The form of meditation that Dhruva engaged in is not practical and is actually not possible for people in this time. The Upanishads speak about this particular category of mantra, Sri Nama, that in this type of spiritual sound or mantra, one does not need to have any unique qualification or any ability or any talent. One can be utterly fallen, totally degraded. And simply by accepting this gift, our life can become transformed bit by bit. Just as the sun, as it approaches the horizon, causes light, and eventually the sun itself appears over the horizon with its warm rays. In a similar manner, by embracing this spiritual sound, it can bring about a purification of the heart and the mind, and the awakening of true transcendental experience and realization. Okay? Could I have a guitar, please? Thank you very much. We will chant the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.